Everyone take the seats. We're going to get started. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just keep saying it louder. Is that
I thought it was my voice.
gavel?
Gavel. I'm going to call the HART Board of Directors meeting to order. If everyone will please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You have received a copy of the June 4th, 2018 board minutes. Hope you had an opportunity to peruse them. What's your pleasure?
So moved.
Has a motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Councilman Suarez to approve the June 4th, 2018 minutes. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted. Public input on agenda items. Is there anyone wishing to address? No one signed up? Okay, very good. We'll move on. Approve action items not received by the HART Board committees. Mr. Stewart.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, board members. The following action items, A through D, have not been to a HART committee, and I will briefly go through each action item and describe exactly what they are and what the purpose is. Action item A, Resolution R 2018-0736. This is authorization for the interim chief executive officer to purchase up to 10 23-foot small cutaway type vans with mobility lifts from Florida Transportation Systems in an amount not to exceed $744,750. As you may recall, last month the board approved the purchase of 10 new buses. It was going to be 11 that I had reported. We deferred to 10. These dollars that you see here are from that decision to buy one less bus. So that's action item A. Action item B.
Oh, wait, can I have a question? Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you're buying 11, but you're taking 12 out of service?
No. Last month we approved buying 10 new buses. Mm-hmm. Those 10 new buses will replace current buses that have reached the end of their useful life. The decision at that time was instead of buying 11 buses, only buy 10. That money that we would have spent on the 11th bus, we're applying to buy these vans with.
Okay, so how many vans are you taking out, sir? Old vans are
10.
you taking?
10.
Okay, so you're buying 11, taking out 10. Okay. What? Thank you for clarification.
Action item B, resolution number R 2018-0737. Authorize the interim chief executive officer to dispose of bus number 2501 through competitive sale, public auction, insurance requirements, or in such a manner to be most advantageous to HART, and retain bus number 2512, which had been previously approved for disposal. The last board meeting, you authorized the disposal of a series of buses that have ended their useful life. We are simply swapping out one of the buses that we had said we wanted to dispose with one that we didn't want to dispose of. So this action item simply is swapping one bus for another bus to be disposed of. Action item C, Resolution R 2018-0738, certifying the proposed ad valorem tax millage rate for fiscal year 2019 budget. Pursuant to Florida Statute 200.65, HART has 35 days from receipt of the certified property value to advise the property appraiser of its proposed not to exceed millage rate, of its rollback rate, and the date, time, and place at which a public hearing will be held to consider the proposed millage rate and the tentative budget, pursuant to Florida Statute 129.03. The prior year millage rate for FY 2018 is 0.5 mils. And again, as a reminder to the board, 0.5 mils is the highest we can set our millage pursuant to the HART Charter. The proposed not to exceed millage rate for 2019 is 0.5. Staff is recommending to keep the millage rate the same at the charter cap. The rollback rate for 2019 is 0.4670, which is 7.07% below the proposed millage rate of 0.5 mils. And as a reminder, the millage rate is the amount of millage that the HART would have to set to equal the same amount of revenue as we did in the prior year. The first public hearing to tentatively approve the millage and tentative budget is September 10th, 2018 at 5:30 p.m. at 1201 East 7th Avenue, Tampa, Florida, which is this building. Back up on the financial impact. The final certified property valuation for Hillsborough County is $93,189,360,143. That is a 10.1% increase in property value from prior year. We will generate $46,594,680 of revenue, budgeted at 95%. What you will see in the coming month at the budget discussions is ad valorem revenue of $44,264,946. This is a $4,052,201 increase in revenue over what we're anticipating receiving in FY18. And that concludes that action item. Action item D, Resolution R 2018-07-39, authorizing the interim chief executive officer to delegate contracting officer authority to named employee in the finance department. That named employee would be Cindy Zambella, director of budget, and she is the interim procurement director while we are pursuing filling that position. Pursuant to HART Procurement Manual and Section 2-100, the Board of Directors confers by resolution general authorization to named employees to execute purchases and enter contracts on behalf of the authority. I need Ms. Zambella to have that authority so she can act in that role until hiring of a permanent position. And that concludes my overview of the action items.
Are there any questions? Ms. Shanahan, you recognize.
Other than the last one, which I understand is a reaction to a personnel change, why did these not go through committee? What prevented them from going through the committee process?
The timing. We had the resignation of the incumbent, and this board meeting occurred before the August committee meeting. And she is in that role, and we need...
No, I said other than the last one. I mean, why? The millage is an annual event that comes up. Why would that have not gone through committee? And the other two actions, A and B.
Oh, other than the last one. So, A, because we have the availability of the funding to be able to move this forward in an expeditious fashion instead of waiting another month. Well, that's primarily it. We had the ability to get it to the board as quickly as possible to get these buses purchased and on site to replace buses that are reaching, or vehicles which are reaching the end of their useful life.
What about the millage? I mean, that comes up every year. Why would it have not gone through committee?
We don't receive the final property valuations until July 1st. And every year we have the millage board discussion in July, and it has never gone to committee. It's due to the timing of the information that we receive from the property appraiser's office.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Commissioner Merman, you recognize.
Thank you. This is on the last one. Who resigned?
Mr. Burns.
Wow. That's a huge loss. Huge loss. So, yeah, you've had a lot of turnover in your top staff then. CFO, procurement. Okay, never mind. I mean, that's a huge loss. Did he leave the state, or is he going somewhere else?
Mr. Burns went to PSTA.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Smith, can we vote on all of these at the same time?
You may.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Move approve for A through D.
There's a motion by Councilman Suarez, second by Commissioner Kemp. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. We're now in discussion items. Board, I ask that this item be placed on the agenda to have a further discussion as to where we are with the interim or with the executive director's position on this board. As you all know, Mr. Seward interim contract runs through November. And felt that we need to have a discussion as to where we're going with this position, seeing that there are a lot of issues out there that really going to pertain to where this agency is and where this agency is going. And as you know, we have a number of options. One is to have his contract continue through November, and we discussed it at a particular point in time. We can either talk about him becoming the permanent executive director today or whenever, or we can decide if we want to do a nationwide search at some particular point in time. So I wanted to bring this forth today and have a discussion, so I'm going to open the floor up for anyone who wants to talk about this particular point in time and see where we go. Mr. Smith.
Yes, I've received an email from one of the board members who asked that his comments be read into the record. So if I have your indulgence, this is from Mr. Melendez. He had a family situation that did not allow him to attend. He apologizes and sends his regrets. But he also wants to say, as a follow-up to our previous discussions, it is my pleasure to offer my firm and sincere vote of confidence in Jeff Seward become HART's CEO rather than just interim. In the 6 years I've worked with him in our respective roles, Jeff has exhibited the leadership qualities and financial acumen befitting an exceptional candidate for the position. These qualities include integrity, foremost of which is Jeff's ability to make and implement difficult decisions which may come under scrutiny. Two recent decisions include canceling the original autonomous vehicle contract, thereby mitigating risk to the organization, and cancellation of the non-sustainable hyperlink program, and repurposing the leased Tesla assets to the Tampa downtowner. I maintain we have a unique opportunity having a CEO with Jeff's financial expertise during a season when the funding reality we face must be tempered with strong fiscal responsibility. Most recently, under Jeff's leadership, HART was awarded over $10 million in state operating and capital grants and has applied for low-no federal grant, an amount of $6.783 million for electric buses and associated infrastructure. Regarding partnerships, which we must rely on heavily moving forward, I've observed Jeff successfully establish key relationships and collaborations with local agency leaders. Some notables include collaboration with the Tampa International Airport for emergency transportation services, SkyConnect, initiating a partnership with the Tampa Housing Authority on bus stop renovation, placement, and aesthetics, collaboration on the Uptowner Circulator, service with the Innovation District, and collaboration with the City of Tampa on the streetcar expansion and dissolution of the in-towner service. For references, see Michael English's accolades in the letter we all received. Jeff also recently led the team to successfully host two high-profile events, including the 2018 APTA Bus and Paratransit Conference in Rodeo. I attended some of the APTA conference and received some of the positive feedback directly from attendees. In addition, Jeff and the team successfully held an autonomous vehicle demonstration with May Mobility, which I also attended along with other board members. As we move forward, continuity and stability will be crucial. Making Jeff CEO now, given his work to date, will provide continuity on initiatives he is currently overseeing, which include revising and redirecting a new solicitation of the autonomous vehicle project in preparation for award in August, paratransit audit, Florida/Fowler BRT study, streetcar service expansion and rededication, mobility point-to-point solutions, Uptowner initiation, annual transit development plan update, closeout of regional transit feasibility plan contract, and federal grant application for bus-to-bus facilities, TOD planning and resiliency opportunities. In closing, I note that in the 7 months we've had to evaluate Jeff, the overall score he achieved from the board speaks for itself, and in my humble opinion supports the notion he is ready for the title HART CEO. Should you move to take action on his status, I would appreciate it if you would take all I have offered here into careful consideration. Thank you. Sincerely, John Melendez.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Is there any other discussion this morning?
Yeah, I have something. I'm a big believer in opportunities of transition allow you opportunities of search, which offer both incumbents or interim leaders to basically compete with other people to achieve the job. And, you know, I have some concerns, albeit with the, I know that there's a lot going on. I think the power has shifted from Tampa to Pinellas, at least in the last 6 months, vis-a-vis leadership in terms of the region. And maybe I'm just seeing that through the Chief ARTA platform, but even though we've made some adjustments, they've all been what I would view as stepping back from any innovation. And that's sort of, I would say, the view in the larger transportation space. And I think Jeff has a lot of strong and capable skill sets, but I also think that we should take advantage of the transition to interview people to see what other ideas that are out there. I think sometimes when you live in an area and you think all the answers are in that area, you really close off a lot of other opportunities of public policy ideas, new innovative relationships that might be brought to the table, and other ideas. And I just, I've done multiple transitions for governors, for presidents, and incumbents usually welcome the opportunity to have the ability to go through a search process to basically show their thinking, show what they would do with the organization instead of just assuming that they're going to do what they continue to do. And I don't think anybody should be afraid of a search, and I would welcome Jeff's active participation in a search. And I think we would get the best candidate with the strategic plan for the area, for transportation. For HART, and I don't think it would be disruptive. I do think there are some, we have interim on a lot of key positions here. I don't know. I've not had any conversation with anybody about that, but I don't know what's happening, and I don't know where that's coming from, and maybe people are just retiring. I don't know what the history is, but we had a CFO situation that was in the public news. We just got news today of Mr. Burns's choosing another agency full-time, and we have an interim maintenance, and I'm sure there's explanations around all of that, but T. BARDA is doing a search right now, and I'm sure that there's a way to piggyback on the back of that search, and that's for a CEO position as well. So I would welcome and encourage the board to think about doing a search and encourage Jeff to actively engage in that process.
Commissioner Murphy, right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and these are always difficult conversations to have at a board meeting, especially with the interim CEO sitting at the dais with us. But I couldn't agree more with Director Shanahan on her comments. And I think, a lot of people are watching this agency right now. And even with the new referendum that's out there, there's millions of dollars that could be funneled through this agency for transit. Are we ready for that? I'm not sure. And I would want to have the most qualified person at the helm. And I think that's why we should not be afraid to have a search. We should not be afraid to have a search and have Mr. Seward really compete and be a part of that. He's done a great job as our CFO over the years, and I appreciate that. But did he fill completely the shoes of Catherine Egan? No. I mean, really, as far as qualifications are concerned. We have a lot riding on this. We have the future of this agency that's about to take over a lot of transit responsibility. This turnover has been a concern. Some of the hires have been a concern for me. People that probably weren't as qualified as counterparts in the community. But I feel like, what are we afraid of? This is a top position. This is somebody that is going to, move and shake the earth as far as transit's concerned in Hillsborough County, and that's important. I do agree. I was just at the Central Florida and our region all got together, the MPOs, and Pinellas was like at the forefront of every single conversation at that meeting. And I'm really starting to get concerned. We've got to flex our muscle. We got to have the best people we can get. So I hope that all of you will look at this really hard and do what's right for this agency. This is a service that people rely on in this community. This is a service that 1 million people almost outside the city limits don't even have a chance to have. And I just hope that you all will agree to do the search and support that. In fact, I'll make a motion to do the search.
That was a motion on the floor by Commissioner Murman, second by Ms. Shanahan to do a search effective immediately, I take it, at this point? Is that what you're asking?
To do the search.
Effective when?
Immediately.
Okay. All right. Mr. Suarez, you're next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Murman, for making that motion. If you had not, I probably would have. Ms. Shanahan put it very succinctly, and I don't know if you all have had conversations with Jeff personally, and I have behind the scenes, and I've told him many times that a competition would be good for all of us, including him. And I wanted to make sure everyone knows that, these are uncomfortable conversations because Jeff is here. It's less uncomfortable for me because I've actually already told him that this is what I wanted to pursue. And I thought that because we are all going to be going through a transition, this board will be going through a transition next year. Okay, we're going to have new county commissioners, or at least different county commissioners. There will be discussions on who's going to be on this board. There will be a new mayor, and there will be a discussion on who the city representatives are going to be. We don't know what direction this board's going to take next year. So I think it's important that we get a solid CEO in place prior to that happening. And I think that it sends a signal, and we're going to have a new governor too. So we have to send a signal to the legislature and the governor and the city government and the county government that this is the direction we want to go. Regardless of where we're all at the end of the day, I think it's extremely important that we get the CEO that we want, and we need to see what's available out there. We were fortunate, and I will tell you this about, there's been some discussion that because we're in transition, that this is the worst time to do it. I disagree. If you recall, Mr. Armijo had come here. He brought along with him Catherine Egan, and in addition, Philip Hale. All of them became the leaders that led this board. Miss Egan could have left immediately after Armijo left. She could have found a job anywhere in this country. As we all know, she was a terrific administrator. Mr. Hale was retiring, and he knew that this was his last duty station, so to speak. So for us, there are people that we're going to find that will rise to the top and be able to lead. It has nothing to do with Jeff and Jeff's performance. I think Jeff is, as Mr. Melendez said in his email, is a man of high integrity and somebody that we all respect. And I think you know that, Jeff. I've said that to you personally. And so for me, I think that it's important to do a search. Because he's under contract, and I'll make sure that Mr. Smith tells me this is true, he's under contract until November anyway, correct? We can extend it until November as the interim. Is that correct?
He is under contract for that time period. There is a termination provision in the agreement.
Terrific. And so we have that opportunity to allow him to lead and still be the CEO. He's going to have the advantage because he's going to demonstrate whatever is going to happen during that search time. But at the same time, we'll get a good sense of who's out there, what we have available to us, and then we can make I think a much more informed decision. So I wholeheartedly support the motion. I appreciate that Ms. Shanahan brought it up. And anytime somebody says I've done transitions for governors and presidents, I don't know about anyone else, but that definitely has a lot of weight for me. So you perk up your ears pretty quickly once you hear that. So, but I think that we should go forward with this and find a way of putting this together and getting a search together. Thank you.
Councilwoman Donahue, you recognize.
Anyone who's seen me at the City of Temple Terrace will be surprised at my comments because I'm normally the person who says it's all about the process, and therefore I would normally recommend that we support this motion. I do not support this motion because I feel that several of the comments that have been made, including Mr. Melendez, indicate that we already have a very high caliber, fully functioning, not interim. Jeff has been, sorry, I shouldn't be using your first name, but Mr. Seward has not been acting as if he was holding a place. He has done things that indicated that maybe we weren't completely on the right path. I mean, some of the changes that have been looked at with Mission Max that weren't working have been changed. Some of the way we were spending federal money and saying, look, can we still have the money if we spend it in this way? And those things have been approved. That means that this is a forward-thinking person who is not doing things just because this is the way we've always done them. As to the employees who've left, we're not going to get into their individual reasons, and we would not. But as everybody knows, teams leave, change, move in different directions. Sometimes the coach just has a different way of coaching, and you can't play by those rules. And that's the case, then it's better for everyone that those people move on. I don't know that that was the case here. I do know we have one that we obviously are all cognizant of, and that had nothing to do with Jeff, but in another way, it had everything to do with the team in place in that they followed every procedure that they should have. They did it exactly right. They gave the employee the opportunity to rethink, and that person chose to resign. So, and that's been in the newspaper, so I'm not saying anything that's a secret. But to me, to waste time and money on a search when we have someone who has gone above, and somebody said, you can't fill Catherine Egan's shoes. I'm really glad you didn't try. I was a huge, huge proponent of Miss Egan, and I thought she did an exemplary job. But that sometimes makes it even harder for the new guy to come in because, if there was something we didn't like about her, we could say, well, thank goodness he's not doing that. But in this case, he's had to go above and beyond. So the list is long, very long. I definitely appreciate the communication that I've received telling me where we are in good times and in bad. I did not necessarily I don't necessarily have that in other organizations that I belong to, so it really makes me feel like there's nothing happening here that I'm not aware of. And so for that reason, and really because I find it to be a waste of time and especially money, I don't see the point in doing a search when we actually have somebody who not only hit the pavement running, but changed the pace and definitely picked things up and moved them along at a much quicker rate than I think any of us expected him to. So I do not support this motion. If I had had the opportunity to make the motion first, it would have been to hire Mr. Seward today. Thank you.
Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
I appreciate very much Councilwoman Donahue's comments, and also I thought it was an incredible list that we were provided by Director Melendez, and how utterly and absolutely strong and how competent and great I think Jeff Seward has been as an interim director. I too 100% unequivocally support moving forward with hiring Jeff as the director. I think, as you said, I'm glad he hasn't filled Catherine's shoes. I do think he's done incredibly exemplary work, and his intellect, his depth of knowledge, his ability to work in the community, and I've heard back so much in terms of both the staff and the community, just so impressed with a new kind of fresh approach taken. His sharp fiscal look, which I don't think we were doing before, because we would not, FDOT was paying $16 for a 3-mile ride for passengers on Hyperlink. But I've read the blogs all over the country. I keep track of all the transit agencies, and pretty much that is a idea whose time has passed now. I saw a major call out for anyone in the country who had a successful hyperlink type program to please give the, info about it. I mean, they're talking about the micro transit, and one person responded, and with the information they gave, it was pretty firmly taken apart as not being truly representative. It's really not. Not to say that it wasn't fine to go into the microtransit, but it's not proven itself to be an effective way to do things. I think it's been amazing that in the time Jeff's been here, we all of a sudden have $10 million that we didn't have. I've been so impressed. $3.5 million for the start of our new bus operations, which I think has been critical for the entire region. And the fact that that hasn't been the top focus, and I'm glad that it's being made that for us to move forward. The streetcar funding that we have, the I-275LX funding that we have, which I think shows us our regional leadership, and that's where I think we should be doing with effective investments when we do that, and ones that are paid for by FDOT. I just think he's been amazing with the bottom line. I went online just to see the other night what I could find out about Jeff, and I did not know, and he did not say, but he was appointed, or he was recognized as the CFO by Tampa Bay Business Journal, the government CFO in this area, awarded that in 2014. So congratulations, I didn't know. Also has a master's in public administration. I just think he has done a super job, and I'm very, I appreciate the fact that you're willing to move forward and do this, because I think to get anyone in, and I don't think most people realize how complex the dynamics are, in particular at this organization, even opposed to any other in the state of Florida except for Pinellas, and nationally, because most of the CEOs of transit agencies come under like a county administrator, or even port authorities come under a county administrator. They're department heads. They don't have to deal with boards like this. They don't have to deal, they do have to deal with some city and county politics, but they don't have to. They have regular funding a lot of times in the big urban areas by their federal government, in a regular way by their state governments, especially for transit operations that we don't have here. I think he's done a superb job in stepping in, and I'm again, thank you, Jeff, for everything you've done. And I would be very supportive of you being a permanent director here. So I of course, will vote no on this. I do not see why we should be wasting resources, money, causing further instability in this organization, which we've had for years. Catherine was only here for 3 years, and for 8 months of it, she was planning to go someplace else. And before that, we've had just very short term. It's about time. We need stability. We need continuity. We need to move ahead in a good direction. I feel like all those things are finally in place here. And I think he has earned the job, and I really think we need you. I think we need Mr. Seward moving forward, so I'm a strong advocate.
Commissioner White, you recognize.
Thank you. Well, I believe this organization, this agency, is going to experience fundamental changes, whether the new sales tax is on the table or not. For that reason, I think we need to take a look at all of our options. So I will be supporting the motion on the floor. I do want to say for the record that I think Mr. Seward is a very capable executive. If this motion passes, I would very much like to see him participate in the process, and he may very well be the winning candidate. But I do think we need to take a look at all of our options.
Mr. Knight, you recognize.
Good. I'd just like to know, I think that, like the survey of the employees, do we have a survey on, what they think and how things are going, or even with the resignation of some of the workers, the things that have happened in the last month or so? We don't know much about it. I'd like to know more about it. I have talked to some of the employees, the riders, the different ones, and I agree that a lot of great things you are doing. But I like to make sure that, because I have like about 32 years with, workers, companies, and different things like that. And the workers and the employees, that's a big part. But I like to know, we know some of it, but as a board, do we have all the info? And I agree that even extending it to November, the CEO, just as your contract expire, somehow, however you do it. But I just want to make sure that we have all the tools needed to properly. And if things work out where all the different areas, whatever their concerns or whatever, that can make it better, then I'm for, looking at it that way and moving forward. I don't say that. I do respect from what I've seen of you and heard, and some of your workers and some you're bringing in. But let's look at some other areas that need some concern, including ridership, the vision of where this routes, this bus system going to go compared to what's out there and what's getting proposed now. So pretty much all I want to say.
I don't think there's been a survey of employees at all anytime in the recent past of.
Actually, we have just completed an employee engagement survey, and we are having focus groups right now. A survey was administered to the organization. As you know, the board adopted a measure last year for our performance scorecard on employee engagement. So we just completed the survey component. We are in the process of doing focus groups, and we'll have a report back to the board in August.
Okay. Mr. Hart,
on the results of.
Point of order for usually for executive reviews, you have a 360, which is done anonymously with direct reports, and you also do exit interviews with people that have left. So that's different than an employee engagement survey.
Okay. Mr. Hart, you recognize.
Thank you. We at HART here, we're a very well-run local bus transit agency with a fairly small budget and a relatively small, governmental funding with the capped millage. So I think, in my opinion, the current opportunities under the funding possibilities that are here are, the super regional. I think we had a big announcement on that with a potential train from Orlando to Tampa, and then hyper local solutions, pivoting to a good extent off new technologies and then, running the agency more efficiently. And with regards to those items, I think that we've seen very exemplary leadership from Mr. Seward. So those are the possibilities, for this agency today. So I think that there is a sales tax referendum out there, and, that'll be a game changer. And, and I really, agree with most of the comments here today regarding Mr. Seward and the idea that we should, that a search could be important. So, as going back to my experience as a executive at the largest division of a publicly traded company, the issue with executive searches is that it be sincere, that it's not just checking the box. And to do that, to really get the highest level of talent, there has to be a true opportunity, and those people that you're reaching out to have to think that they have a possibility of getting that job. With regards to where we are now, I firmly believe that Mr. Seward is the correct candidate for all the reasons that we heard from Councilwoman Donahue and Commissioner Kemp and the others. So, with regards to if the game changes and there's a significant funding and or a shifting of, responsibilities between interlocal agencies, I think that's a different beast. But I'm not sure we have enough information to know that that's going to happen right now. So if that's, underpinning some of the conversation today, I just wanted to put it out there. With maybe there's an interim solution, like, extending Mr. Seward's contract for a period of time into the spring, and then making an orderly decision once we know what's going to happen with the sales tax referendum, to decide whether we want to, go to market seriously to look at what's available for us once we know, and honestly have a a sales tax surtax in place to help us to attract the person that we might like to see at that time. So, and that's my input.
Ms. Williams, you recognize.
Thank you. From my standpoint, I'm coming at this from a business standpoint, and if I were to hire an executive employee, it would not occur to me not to look outward or inward as well. We would voice a concern from an internal standpoint as well as from an external standpoint, and we would look for the best candidate. However, in the short time period that I've been here on the board, I've seen Mr. Seward in his real acumen around the financials. And so I know there are a number of things that have happened over the short period of time that Keegan's been gone. And so from that standpoint, employees are going to see that differently. Employees are going to determine if they want to be in this environment compared to where they were before, because some tough decisions have to be made when you think about your financials and your and how we move this business forward, considering the shortfall we were in. And so to that point, I say Mr. Sears is doing a great job based on the interaction that I've had with him in a very short period of time. However, his contract is through November, and I like to see him work through that contract. But I am very open to a selection process to see who is the best candidate. And quite frankly, I think Mr. Sears would have an advantage over others, considering the work that he's been doing. And also I might add that we talked about a lot of things that happened previously. However, I believe he was the financial officer that contributed to some of those successes and has had to make the tough decisions going forward. So that's my perspective in a short period of time. As a corporate leader, we always solicit and look for the best candidate. And seeing that he's been in this business in this position for 9 months, and that is something that we typically don't do in corporate, is allow someone to sit in who is also vying for the job. So unfortunately, he's already met 9 months of it. His contract doesn't end until November, and I foresee him seeing that out as a recommendation and then revisiting at that point a selection.
Mr. McLean, you recognize.
Thank you. First off, I just want to say thank you for what I would call a healthy and civil conversation on what is a very touchy issue, if you will. We have Jeff sitting right here with us as we discuss what I would call the future of Jeff as the CEO for HART. I will say that I agree with just about everything that's been said here, whether that was pro or against, maintaining what I would call Jeff's contract through November. Ms. Shanahan brought up some great points, along with Mr. Melendez in his letter. Commissioner Kemp and Commissioner Merman, I appreciate those conversations there. For me, as I look at HART and I look at the transitions we've made over the course of the last year, I would say, I wasn't here before Catherine. I was here with Catherine. Catherine was a very, very dynamic CEO. We used to refer to ourselves as the cool kids on the block, and we used to push initiatives. As I step back a little bit, I hate to say this, but maybe we were pushing just a little too fast sometimes, and we went back and corrected some of those. But regardless, we were still out there and pushing. My biggest concern as we move forward, as you see some of the things and initiatives that are happening within a community, whether that's T-BARTA, whether that's the referendum, my biggest concern is stability. We've seen a couple folks leave here, of course, the CFO, of course, under no what I would call fault of Jeff's. And then we've seen some other key employees leave. I think that does cause some concern, but I do agree with an organization of this size. When we look at an 800-plus organization, you are going to get turnover like that, and there's going to be opportunities for what I would say some of those folks that are excelling in their positions. But I get back to stability. And so as I look at this, I do welcome a search, if you would. However, I do believe we have Mr. Stewart at the interim until November, and I, too, would probably like to see that played out. And then, again, take a review of that and see if that's what we want to do after we see if some of these other things are going to play out and how they play out, particularly the referendum and some things. So for right now, my push would be I would like to see Jeff. Jeff's doing a fantastic job as far as I'm concerned, stepped in to fill some big shoes, although we didn't go that route. And I would like to see him allowed to continue at least through November, and then we do another evaluation whether we want to do a search or whether we want to make him the permanent. So that's where I'll stand. So,
Mr. Mechanic, you recognize.
Well, when I came here this morning, I really hadn't made up my mind. I think Jeff has done a fine job. I think he's excelled in certain areas. I think some regarding his relationships with other agencies, the airport, DOT immediately come to mind, and I think Director Melendez's comments sort of underscore that. But I'm also sensing, and I don't even know where the majority is going to fall on this motion, but I sense that there is at least a question of confidence, and I don't know that that's healthy for the organization either. And I think if we do not proceed with a search, we leave Jeff with a cloud hanging over his head. And so even though this may not be the greatest of reasons, I'm going to support the motion just to get the ball rolling and have a decision made one way or the other. And I would encourage Jeff to participate in the process. And I would also suggest that I don't have a feel for whether will be done at the time of Jeff's contract termination, but I would ask this board and Jeff to consider staying on longer on an interim basis if we're not finished with the executive search process, assuming the motion passes. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I guess it's my time. I'm not going to support the motion. I've always said, whether it's in this agency and other agencies, if we have someone that's qualified to do the job, why spend an enormous amount of money to go out there and do a search, and we have that person here? I've worked with Jeff since he's been in this interim position for 9 months. I worked with him before when he was in CFO in this agency. There has been some turnover, but tell me which agency, when there is a new executive director or CEO that comes in a position that some top-heavy people do not leave. We had it happen in the county commission when we hired Mike Merrill. We brought on Mike Merrill, some top people left. Whether it was on their own accord or Mr. Merrill being the county administrator wanted a new change in his administration, it happens. In the legislative process, when a new president, a new Speaker of the House comes in, of course his immediate staff surrounding him will leave, but we all know, and especially Commissioner Merriman with us, know that even down the ladder in some committee directors, when a new speaker or a new president come in on their own, that they leave. Now, I don't know why others in this agency left, and I don't think that we need to ask that question, because of the mere fact is that we are not the day-to-day operators of this agency. We're the policymakers of this agency. If it gets to the point that you see a mass exodus of some top people, then we need to really be concerned. But I think that we have the person we need in this agency sitting here. I'm not in favor of a search at this particular point in time. If we don't get to the point of hiring Mr. Seward today, and we send the contract through November, he's already has a contract through November. We see what happens at that particular point in time. But I'm not in favor of a search. When we have someone on board, I just think that that's what we need to do instead of sending thousands upon thousands of dollars, taxpayer dollars, or whatever the case may be, looking for a search, and we come right back and hire the person that's sitting in that same seat. Makes no sense to me. So that's my point. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, say
nay.
Nay.
The chair is in doubt. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Am I missing right? Motion passes. 65, if I counted right. That's what it was? Okay, so the motion passes 65. Ms. Donahue?
Now that we've approved this, can someone please explain what they want to happen next?
That was my question. Who will handle this search within staff? Is that Ms.?
I look to you, sir.
Mr. Chair, if you would like, I could provide the context that some board members might not know. This board previously authorized the retention of Krauthammer and Associates to conduct the search. The search was not accepted in terms of moving forward, but the contract was agreed to. There are, according to Mr. Burns, one of the preeminent firms in the industry. So, and that was why I believe this board approved it. And at that point in time, it was put on hold. We talked to Krauthammer. They were fine. They had done some preliminary work, but they did not bill us for that. So they exist. There's a contract. It's a 3-year contract. So that is what the board has done to date. What would happen, and Ms. Sambella can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe what we would do is negotiate the specific search with Krauthammer to go forward if the board chooses to do that. The contract's for $200,000. That's a maximum over 3 years, bless you. But it includes multiple searches. As I recall, I believe there was a discussion that the CEO search was somewhere in the neighborhood of about a $75,000 fee. So just to give you the background information, you've already approved that. It's sitting there. You can authorize staff to negotiate the contract and move forward if that is the sense of the board.
What's your pleasure?
I think that, can I just make a point of clarification? I think that's the same search firm that T-Barter's using, and I think they negotiated with them, and I think there's an ability to negotiate with them.
Well,
so
correct.
I just, I don't know that for a fact, but I think that's the one they ended up with.
Okay, well, what's your pleasure still?
Question. You said there were multiple searches. Are we looking for other people in that? What I don't understand.
They've been retained to conduct executive searches, not just CEO. So if there is a need to search for a CFO, et cetera, they've been retained as an executive search firm. And it's correct, they do negotiate on a contract-by-contract basis.
So at this particular point in time, we're just searching for a CEO, not CFO, correct? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Merman, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think definitely you should head up the search. You should appoint a search committee, and you would head that up moving forward. But definitely some board members work alongside you with the Krauthammer team, and then bring the scope, what the scope is, back to this board, and then we just move forward.
Well, my point is now is, are we going to utilize Krauthammer? Is that, am I pronouncing that right?
That's, yes, that's
we've already talked to them. We put them on hold. So my question is, do we utilize those folks, or do we look for someone else?
If I could, Chair, I think that I would like to make a motion that we move forward with the contracted facilities that we have now, so that they can go out and find a CEO. I think that, and this is up to the chair to select an ad hoc committee that that information would go to, and then we could actually look at it, make recommendations, and then bring it to the board.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I did.
Second by a number of people. Ms. Donahue, you have a question? Timeline. Well, the contract of Mr. Seward ends in November. That's 4 months from now. My question is, with the committee that I want to appoint, ad hoc committee I want to appoint, will we have our work done by that particular point in time? Remember, we have to have that search firm go out and find those folks. And I would imagine that we ask them to dwindle it down to a certain number, and the committee will interview those particular folks. And we will come back. Well, the committee will come back with their recommendation. And if this body wants to interview those particular ones, we can do that. If not, you take the word of the ad hoc committee with their recommendations, and we go from there. So can we have that done in 4 months is a question.
That's my concern, is that I don't want to put Mr. Seward in limbo or lose him, either one. And he has not indicated that.
Right.
I'm not putting, please don't take that as a threat. I just want to make sure that we're taking care of Mr. Seward and doing this in the right time manner so that we don't put him in a bad position.
Let me ask this question. Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Smith, do you believe that that firm can have everything completed by, is there a specific date, November 30th?
My recollection is those conversations which Mr. Burns had with Krauthammer, he shared some of that with me. My recollection was that's going to be a fairly ambitious time frame. It could happen. I think he said 3 to 6 months. I realize that's a lot of expanse, but sometimes in searches like this, it depends on the response you get. Sometimes you have to go out for additional solicitations. So I don't know if we have anybody here on staff that's done a search like that, but that's my input. We're looking at 3 to 6 months.
So we're talking about at the maximum January, if it's 6 months.
I believe that would, if that's 6 months, yes, sir.
Okay. So if that's where we are, a couple of things need to happen. We did Councilman Suarez, you need to go back and amend your make a new motion, if you don't mind, to add a date, time certain onto your motion.
Okay.
For that, we need to talk about the contract that Mr. Seward has, because it ends in November.
And if I could ask a question of Mr. Smith, what date in November does it end? The end of November,
November
or is it
30th,
midterm? I would assume it's the end.
I think it's November 27th, but it's in the backup material. But it is the end of November.
What lawyer would put just a random date like the 27th?
It might have been a Friday or something. I don't know.
I don't know. I thought that it was a good way of doing a gratuitous lawyer joke. So
thank you.
You're welcome.
I miss
Councilman Suarez,
I would make the motion that by the end of October we would have the recommendation come back to the regular November meeting, because I'm trying to think if we have a regular November meeting now. Typically, Ms. Pettit, do we usually have? You do have one. Let's have the ad hoc committee do their work, come back as of the November meeting. By the end of October, the search should be done.
Okay, you maybe missed this point.
I apologize.
The fact of the matter is that they may not have enough time to do that in October. That's why he said up to 6 months. That's why I asked you to withdraw your motion to add it to January.
Chair, I appreciate that particular viewpoint, but we always have the ability to make sure that we extend the interim definition for Mr. Seward at that time in November. I think that if we push our contracted folks to come back by October, and if they have to come back to us and say, sorry, we couldn't find any qualified candidates, then I think at that time we have to make that decision.
So you're talking about 3 months now. So you're really going to push that organization to find someone within 3 months.
And I would say, Chair, that because of the advanced information that they had gained from us during the time frame when Ms. Egan left and before Jeff made the decision that he wanted to take on as an interim and to be considered for that, I think that we may have a little bit of a leg up.
So make your motion.
My motion stands in terms of October, the end of October. So that's what I would do. I would amend my original motion to include the time frame, the end of October.
Is there a second? Second. There's a motion to have the search firm to hopefully have their work completed and to that committee by the end of October. So therefore, it could come to this board sometime, hopefully in November.
Correct, sir. Yes.
All right. Is there any discussion on the motion? Commissioner Kemp, recognize.
Yeah. I think this time frame is very unwise in terms of how we move forward. We have, as has been alluded to, a possibility of some type of referendum on transit. We have possibilities of more resources. We have a lot of things in flux that could determine within the next 6 months some changes in the organization. And I think that that would most definitely be an issue in terms of what candidates we might attract and what we might be looking for, as I think Director Harden, when he spoke to it earlier, that it might be a very different kind of candidate that we would be looking for in November than we would be looking for in January or February. I really don't think that we should even think about starting the search until after we see what happens in November. And so I think that we should start a search process then, actually, and be looking, because when we advertise, we could be a very different organization, and when we recruit candidates, we could be a very different organization that could attract a different type of candidate.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers?
Nay.
Okay, I'm in doubt again. All those in favor of the motion, let it be known by raising your hand. All those opposed? Motion fails. Pardon?
Oh, what was? Oh, I thought I saw more up than down.
You saw four. You saw four in favor of it, and the rest were against.
One of the great things about being the chair is that you get to see everything. So it's hard to see
when
you're over here.
Okay.
Maybe my hearing is going bad. My eyesight's pretty good. So we're back at where we are looking for. We already talked about the search firm, but we don't have a date in place of what we're going to do. So we need to have a timeline. So, Commissioner White, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion, and I'll accept council's advice on this too, as to whether or not we need to speak to Mr. Seward's contract at the same time. But I'll make a motion that that we have a list of candidates prepared by the search firm. And I'll speak in terms of Monday through Friday, like you mentioned previously. I like that idea. So I'll say the last Friday in February to be considered at our March board meeting. Do we have a board meeting in March? I know spring break is in March. Do we meet in March? I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? There's a motion by Commissioner White to carry forth the search for the new executive director from the search firm through February 28th. Is that what you said?
Last Friday.
Last Friday, March, or February. Okay, and a second by Commissioner Kemp. It's a further discussion. Ms. Donahue, you recognize.
My question is that, what does that do to Mr. Seward's contract?
Well, we haven't gotten to that point yet.
Can we roll that in?
I think that, well, if you want to roll that in, but I think that should be probably a separate motion.
All right, I want to make sure that we don't lose Mr. Seward in the meantime.
Right. Any other discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, another 9 months.
A what?
You're talking about an additional 9 months from the point in time where we are today. And, I mean, again, maybe you like them or maybe you don't, but I have done presidential and governor searches that are done in 3 to 6 months at the most. And so I just... I think we should talk to the professionals in the space. So somebody, I would think we should talk to Krauthammer. We've got them on contract and see what they say from a timeline perspective. And then come back to the board with a recommendation of what's a realistic time frame. So you're going from the end of October, which was Commissioner Suarez's recommendation, to the end of March, which is like, that's another 6 months of an interim leader going through transition time, going through, is he hiring or firing people? Is he keeping the CFO position open so he can go back into that position? There's a lot of interim disruption that you're going to continue to manage through. And I think the more you extend it, the more you're sending the message, we don't even know what we're doing as a board. You're not going to get any attractive candidates. And maybe that's the goal, but I believe if you go through a search and you get the job, you've earned the job, and you feel empowered to do the job. And I think if you don't, then you're sort of always hesitant about, to David's point earlier, do you have the confidence of the board and the community? So there was clearly a tight vote on that, and I just think we should do it as expeditiously as possible with knowledge from the professionals in the space that actually do searches in transportation for C-suites 24 hours a day. So I think we're working with a lot of he said, she said, anecdotal information, and no one's talked to the professionals. And I think there's still a lot of emotion on the table about the vote in terms of proceeding with a search. And I don't think anybody should be, I think people should be inspired by that. You're going to learn so much by talking to both the professionals in the space as well as the other candidates. So I just, I guess my point is, I think March is way too long. And if you want to go through November, we're going to know by November where the ballot is in terms of where that's going to be. And I don't know what other hidden surprises people think there are in terms of potential impact on the organization that's going to happen between now and November. But, you know, we're talking about, I don't know. I think March is way too long.
Commissioner Shanahan, do you want to make an amendment to the motion then?
I would move that we interview candidates no later than the end of November and make a decision by the December meeting.
Okay,
and if we need to have a special meeting, we can have a special meeting.
There's an amendment to the motion and a second. And further discussion on the amendment. Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
I'll just make my point quickly again, that I think with the agency in flux, that the wiser way to take it, and I don't think that there's this fear of a search. I just think there's a sense of wanting stability and feeling as though, at least on my part, we have somebody really wonderful. I have no fear of a search. I worry about the stability of HART and moving forward in the position we're putting all the staff in here.
Commissioner Kemp, we're talking about the amendment now. You're going off the amendment.
I understand. But what I'm saying is that we need to, I think we need to have a longer period of time here so that we can so that we can know what situation the HART is in and move forward and advertise as we are at the time. And I think to do otherwise in this where we are now and try to rush this through is not wise.
Commissioner White, you recognize.
Well, I'll just say for the record that the way I came up with my time frame, and I'm not an HR professional, I'll be the first to admit that, but I was just wondering about the implications on the applicant pool with bringing this in for a landing right as Thanksgiving and Christmas are approaching. However, I have no issue with the amendment to the motion that's been made. I think from a business standpoint, that makes sense. So I'll vote in favor of the time frame that's been put on the floor as an amendment.
Mr. McLean, you recognize.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we all understand, and so we'll walk through the time frame. Search would end the end of November, is what we're saying, with a selection presented to the board in December. Is that what I'm hearing? Just so everybody understands. Okay, and then if we did that, then we probably wouldn't have a new CEO until January of the following year. So January 19 is when we're looking for a new CEO in place. Is that what we're thinking?
It's a timetable.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure everybody's tracking that same thing.
Commissioner Mervin, you recognize.
Thank you. I'll make this very, very quick. I just, we can't be afraid. We already voted to do it, so let's just do it. The guy's already gotten prepared. He's done 2 months of work basically already. So we have 3 to 4 months. I mean, he can go right in and start a search. I mean, that's how ready, because I remember going through this with them. But let's not make our decisions on what ifs. There are too many what ifs here. And let's just move forward, be decisive. Let's look at the vision for HART for the future. And just, Mr. Seward's done a great job, especially as CFO. And I hope that we can just really get off the ground and see what's out there.
Okay, we have an amendment. We have an amendment on the floor to the motion. Seeing no further discussion on the amendment, all those in favor of the amendment, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise?
No.
Motion is adopted. We're back on the motion. Is there further discussion on the motion? Seeing no further discussion on the motion, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise? Motion is adopted. Mr. Smith, do we need to do anything with this contract at this particular point in time?
Currently, it expires November 30th of this year. So if you anticipate this process consummating at best in January, you could certainly consider an extension. It would seem to be prudent.
To January 31st?
Probably so. You have a little transition. If you get a different CEO, you'll have transition discussions anyway.
There's a There's a motion to send Mr. Seward's contract to January 31st, second by a number of members. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Hold up. Did you want to say something?
I wanted to say, the reason I say what I did, because really have a concern and a passion for the workers and moving in the right direction. And if Mr. Seward continue on doing things and then we have all the information that we need, then we can make a real conscientious decision on who the CEO. It could be, Mr. Seward and the workers, the community, and the one that happened to pay the bill, and the direction on where you want to take it. So far, I have, communicated with some of the staff and willing to do things that the people are asking for. And as we get more into it, once I see some of the things over there on 21st, different areas, then it should be pretty much as close anyway that we will continue with Mr. Seward. So that's what I like to see. But I want to make sure that we explore our option as well.
Is there any further discussion on the motion to extend the contract of Mr. Seward to January 31st? Seeing none, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted. Okay. I would like to have an ad hoc committee of at least 5 members. So, whoa.
You're going to have to draw names.
I'm going to ask staff to send out a memo today asking for members who volunteer to serve on that committee. Get those names back to me, and I'll appoint that committee and have that as soon as possible. Okay? All right. Okay. Government Relations 180-day action plan. Jerry Presley. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Miller and board members. I'm Jerry Presley, Senior Manager of Government and Business Relations with HART. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you today to share information about HART's Government Relations Action Plan. HART staff is committed to significantly improving our government relations activities for 2018 and beyond. Government relations is a critical component of our daily operations, and we must maintain a strong, healthy relationship with our local, state, and federal partners in order for us to achieve our mission and goals as an agency. Without support, we cannot achieve success and fulfill our commitment to the community. The purpose of this action plan is to ensure that HART staff is building a solid foundation for our government relations program. The plan sets very specific goals and objectives that are designed to solidify and create the groundwork for building support for HART's future short and long-range policy and funding plans. It contains, what happened here? Okay. It contains 2 key action components: attending key meetings and events to establish HART's presence for key and elected appointed officials, and establishing key projects and programs that will help guide HART's future government relations activities in an organized, efficient, and effective manner. Over the course of the 180-day period, staff will be focused on developing relationships with elected officials and key stakeholders. The plan calls for staff to gain an in-depth knowledge and understanding about the current and planned activities, understand current strategies, and determine HART's priorities and needs as an organization. It calls for staff to meet with HART's contract lobbyists and understand current activities and plan their future goals and objectives. It calls for staff to meet with state and federal transit and transportation agencies to develop relationships and determine potential funding opportunities. It also calls for staff to meet with local elected and appointed officials from the city of Tampa, Temple Terrace, and Hillsborough County. Staff will also need to schedule individual meetings with our state legislative delegates, schedule meetings with our U.S. congressional delegates and or their staff representatives, and schedule meetings with our senators, Nelson and Rubio, or their staff representatives. It calls for staff to attend transit and transportation-related meetings throughout the region and meet with various candidates who are running for public office during the current election cycle. Now, as it relates specifically to meeting with candidates, please understand that we are approaching the matter very delicately. We are not in any way going to endorse or otherwise support any particular candidate. Our goal is to simply educate them about who we are as an agency and what we do. We want to ensure that they understand our concerns and needs as an agency and as an organization so that in the event that they are elected for public office, they already have a working knowledge about HART. Now, for HART to be successful in its activities, staff has identified a number of key projects that will need to be implemented during this 180-day period. First and foremost, staff must actively utilize the Legislative and Strategic Planning Committee of the Board of Directors to provide needed guidance and direction to staff. This will help to ensure that the board is an active participant in the process and kept in the loop on staff activities at all times. We also need to develop a comprehensive legislative and funding agenda for the 2019 legislative session. The agenda needs to contain very clear objectives and include both local, state, and federal priorities. This is perhaps the most critical action item for the board to be considering, as the planning efforts for the new legislative session will begin very soon. Now, immediately following the establishment of the 2019 agenda, HART needs to develop a short-range 5-year agenda so we can strategically plan our future government relations activities over the course of the next couple of years. HART will also need to consider the development and implementation of a long-range comprehensive 10-year agenda. This will ensure that HART has an organized, well-defined, consistent policy and funding strategy as it moves forward. Finally, HART will need to develop a coordinated communication plan for government relations. This will ensure that we have an effective communication strategy for ensuring support for HART's programs and projects. This includes developing both marketing and communication materials for public distribution and talking points for the BOD and the executive staff regarding our policy and funding agenda. Now, as you can see, there is a lot of activity that has to be done over the next few months, and staff is going to be working diligently to ensure our success. We request that the board join us in this effort and actively participate in helping to define our policy and funding priorities and be an active champion for our causes moving forward. So where exactly are we in the process today? Well, staff has already initiated the plan and taken the following actions. We've held internal meetings during the month of May and June to help determine our priorities and our current activities. We've met with our contract lobbyists. We've actively been meeting with representatives of FDOT. We're working to schedule meetings with FTA representatives. We've met with some of our local city and county officials during the month of June, and we will continue to do so throughout the month of July and August. In addition, we are actively attending various events around the region and taking every opportunity to develop relationships with key officials and stakeholders and candidates. We're actively attending transit and transportation meetings around the region, including TBARTA meetings and MPO meetings, FDOT events, and actively observing the Regional Transit Feasibility Initiative and the All for Transportation Citizens Initiative. Now, please understand that staff is closely monitoring what is happening with these two last initiatives, and we are in no way supporting or endorsing or promoting these initiatives in any way. But we do believe it is necessary, however, for us to understand what is happening with these two initiatives, because they may have a significant, or will have rather, a significant impact, a potential impact to our programs and services moving forward. We are actively attending other meetings regularly where transit and transportation is a topic, and we will continue to do so moving forward. Now, in addition to the previous activities, HART staff collectively has been actively pursuing new funding opportunities. Some were mentioned earlier, but we are actively pursuing these new opportunities from FDOT and FTA. Leadership has secured approximately $7 million in new funding for projects and services in the last few months alone. This includes $2.67 million for enhancing streetcar services, $2.5 million for the BRT study that we're currently undertaking, $1.4 million for the 275 LX route, $270,000 for the Uptowner project, $216,000 for the new Route 48 servicing Temple Terrace. In addition, we are also pursuing and looking to secure an additional $5 million in funding to help, from FDOT to help fund construction activities related to the heavy maintenance facility. If we're successful in this last endeavor, it will help to bring our total investment opportunity up to approximately $12 million. Now, to further these efforts, HART has also created an internal grants team to better coordinate our grants activity. The new team has submitted one grant application for FTA's low-no emissions vehicle grant program that was mentioned for the purchase of 5 electric buses and necessary charging equipment. And we're also in the process of submitting 4 other applications within the next 30 days. This includes an FTA pilot transit-oriented development planning grant that we're doing in partnership with the City of Tampa, Hillsborough County Planning Commission, and the Hillsborough MPO. There are going to be 3 applications that we're submitting under FTA's bus and bus facilities grant program. One is for the purchase of 15 buses and 10 new vans. A second one is for construction related to the heavy maintenance facility. And the third will be for repairs that are needed at our MTC facility. Finally, we are also going to be submitting an application under FTA's Hurricane Emergency Relief Fund Resiliency Grant Program. This particular grant fund is designed to help fund projects that protect equipment and facilities from future emergency disasters and can be used to help fund our stormwater mitigation efforts at our 21st Avenue facility where we're having some challenges. Now, as we look into the new year and beyond, there are additional funding opportunities that we will need to consider and will most likely pursue in order to help fund HART's projects. There's the U.S. DOT Build Grant Program, which can be used for construction of the proposed local BRT projects that are being studied. There's also opportunities under FTA's Capital Investment Grant 5309 for investing in our modern streetcar services. There's the Volkswagen Settlement Fund that's available for replacing or rehabilitating aging diesel buses. This can include the purchase of new vehicles or engine replacements to help extend the life of our diesel fleet. And then there's also Homeland Security grants for improving public safety opportunities within HART's system. This can include the purchase of video cameras and other devices that help to improve the safety and security of our passengers. Now, we will continue to aggressively pursue traditional funding opportunities utilizing FTA's low-no emissions grant program, the bus and bus facilities infrastructure grant program, our formula grants, and our state of good repair grants. Staff will continue to aggressively research other grant and funding opportunities offered by both public and private partners in order to ensure that we are utilizing all available resources moving forward. Now, as you all know, HART recently ended our state lobbyist contract, and we're actively pursuing a new RFP for those services. Our goal is to have a new contract in place by October 1st. You will learn more about that RFP and the process during the next presentation. In the interim, however, HART has made plans to ensure continuity in these services by having government relations staff be actively meeting with our state delegates, FDOT officials, and executive branch officials as needed in order to ensure that we are being properly represented. Now, as it was mentioned back in May when I joined HART, I am an experienced lobbyist with over 20 years of professional experience working with elected and appointed officials at all levels of government. I have worked with state and federal transportation officials and members of the executive branch and legislature in the state of Georgia, and I will easily translate those experiences to benefit HART here. So please understand and know that you can be confident that staff will not allow our efforts to fall through the crack. I'm here to serve you and this agency to the very best of my ability, and I will utilize all the knowledge, experiences, and skills that I have for HART's benefit moving forward. Again, thank you for the opportunity to come before you today, and I am available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Taking into strong consideration the comments that we have heard, specifically from Director Shanahan and Commissioner Merman on the importance of establishing a strong plan moving into the next year's session. Something that we are doing, and Jerry touched on it in the planning, is in the past, and at least the 7 years that I have been here, our establishment of a state legislative priority list has really been staff sitting around and deciding on where we needed funding and where we wanted funding. Something that we're doing completely different this year to have a much more strong board catalyst in that discussion is really utilizing the Legislative and Strategic Planning Committee that Director McLean chairs. And to that point, we are going to take our current CIP, we're going to take our current TDP, we're going to take the TIP, we're going to take the FDOT work plan, and we're going to sit down and workshop starting next month that committee and talk through what the priorities are, short-term, long-term, and really establish a strong ask going into the session next year. Now, based on this morning's conversation, that session will occur right at the cusp of hiring a new leader in the organization. So still feel strongly that we need to move forward with that strong ask, irrespective of that conversation. So it can easily be handed over. We can start talking to our legislative delegations, our stakeholders, well before the December timeframe. And I feel pretty strongly that having the committee workshop and develop it versus staff developing it and then handing it to this body, it holds a lot more credibility and ownership of that ask going into the next session. So that's our plan. We're going to take it very seriously and have the committee actually report it back to you versus staff.
Any questions? Mr. McLean, you recognize.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Jerry, for pulling that together. I asked Jerry and Jeff to pull this group together somewhat and hit on some of these topics, more so to share this with the board, but also to implore your support for this. I had the opportunity of joining Jeff at APTA this year. We went up there and took advantage of our time up in D.C. We met with a few of our Washington leaders, if you will, Congresswoman Castor and Senator Nelson. In one of those meetings, we joined PSTA, which was very well received. And of course, Congresswoman Castor always receives us very well. During my time with Jeff, I asked him how often we did this, how often we engaged with our state leadership also. And what I'm asking is for us to do that more often. And to do that more often as a board. Of course, on this board, we have quite a few elected officials. And I know you're out there and meeting with our state leadership and of course, when the chance offers, the leadership in Washington. I ask you to continue to do that and do it robustly in support of HART. Part of that, of course, is providing you with information, direction, and of course with pulling that from you also as we try to craft these way forwards, if you will. So my ask to you is actively engaged. My SCU is actively engaged in the benefit of HART and in benefit of our community as we try to serve them with the capabilities we present to the community. So that's why you saw this briefing, and I just wanted to let you know where that kind of stemmed from and why. So,
thank you, Mr. McLean. Commissioner Merman, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the report very much. We've had absolutely no activity in this committee for about, I think it's going on 6 months. So we have a lot of catching up to do. I made some points here. Number one, not one mention was made about the upcoming leadership in the House and Senate from the Tampa Bay area. And that needs to be completely focused on. That's where I think HART individual asks become more important. There was no mention of TVARDA in any of your presentation. Are you also talking with TVARDA?
Yes, ma'am, and I did address that. It is in the presentation that we would be attending both T-BARTA meetings and MPO meetings as well, being very active.
Here's how I feel about federal. And, I mean, I think it's a good thing, but you better be collaborating and go up there with a partnership ask. If we're just going up asking for ourselves, it's not nearly as strong as going there with DOT and other partners, which is different than the state level. You can ask individually here, but it's more important to be collaborative. I will tell you, almost at every level, federal, state, and local, people, you've got to start speaking with one voice. And it's very important that HART engage in collaborative relationships and not try and do this on your own. We've been trying to do that for too long and really have not been successful. One thing was in your slide about new reallocated funding, the $7 million. How much of the $7 million is new?
Mr. Siebert, I'll let you answer that question because he's been more instrumental in those discussions than myself.
All except the $1.4 million for the 275 LX route and the 216 for the Route 48. Those were repurposing of
I
prior
thought the
grants.
Uptowner was repurposed too.
I don't believe so. No, that's new money. Streetcar's new money, BRT's new money, the Uptowner's new money, and this maintenance facility, $5 million will end up being new money as well.
And the BRT money came from MPO, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that I think we have been working on. So how far back is the $7 million? Does it go a year? Or
we just looked basically over the last several months, maybe 4 or 5 months.
So several of those items are a lot older than the last couple of months.
Right, but they may have been actively worked on, but the funding has been recently secured.
Okay.
Right, and I would argue that we have been working on them quite some time, with no progress whatsoever.
Okay. The priorities are really important for this agency, and I've been saying that, and it's more geared around how are we going to raise the new revenue. I've been saying that in this committee. We were supposed to have a workshop. It didn't happen, but I would like to see at every single board meeting a report from you in your activities, what you've done out in the field, if that's okay with you, and any progress that you've made. I really would like to see an activity report. Because if we're going to get serious about this, we have to start with accountability.
We can start adding a legislative update report to the board.
Okay. That's all.
And I give Mr. Siebert a monthly report on all of my activities as well.
Okay.
I'm happy to provide that to the board.
Well, we need to see that.
Why do I feel like it's Groundhog Day? Consistent, regular, repetitive engagement. That's what legislative affairs is. So I appreciated the overview, and I tend to be very direct. I haven't met with you or spoken to you. I'm glad you're here. I hope that your Georgia experience, it is understanding the process. It is helpful to know the people, but it doesn't take long if you have a good prep when you go into the meetings. And, I'm only in town nowadays like maybe 1-2 days a week. In the last 4 weeks, I've had lunch with Jeff Brandis, lunch with Chris Sprawls, met with Wilton Simpson. I have no talking points. And I'm sure the elected officials around this table have had 10,000 more engagements than I have. We miss the opportunity because we're not consistent, regular, engaged. And we should have talking points with specificity. We didn't get until we got to slide 10. I don't need to know how to run a government affairs operation. We all know what we've been that was sort of his job description. What I want to know is what are we asking for? What was specificity? So what I heard Jeff just walk through is that you're not going to do it from staff. Well, staff has to provide input, which is always the case in policy engagement. You have to provide what are the priorities. It's going to go to the committee. It's going to come back to the committee. It's going to go to the board. So when do you anticipate that we would have the priorities of what we're going to ask for in March when the meetings have the conversations have already happened? I'm telling you right now.
September. We're going to workshop in August.
You're too late.
Well, I will argue strongly that in the 7 years that I was CFO.
For those of you who don't know, the legislative process, committee meetings will not start until after the election, so it's not too late in September. The committees haven't even been appointed yet.
I know.
So let him finish saying what he's saying, and it's not too late, because Commissioner Merman, you know that it's election year, they don't hold any committee meetings, and it won't happen until after those elections, and everybody gets sworn in. Probably the first committee meetings will be held in December.
I just want to make the case that this is an every year event, and we should be looking at least a snapshot of priorities now, because as we know, they are moving around the state right now, collecting a lot of money, all of them, both sides of the aisle. We're all, I don't know what our priorities are. I sort of know what we've gotten, and it's not like this is like a new thing. This is an annual sort of cycle of engagement, consistent communication. And, I appreciate where we are. I don't know what the 180-day timeline is, but, we have in the next 6 to 8 years in Pinellas and Hillsborough, we have leadership authority. This is where transitional investments get made. If you look at the history of when Miami had the leadership, our chairman was living it. Sandy Merman was living it. You look at how much money they got for MDX, MTX, whatever you want to call it, down in Miami. Millions of dollars, not scraps. We don't have a strategic plan around the next 8 years of what's moving through our region in any way, shape, or form. That's what we should be having. That's the conversation we need to have. What are the big asks? What are the small asks? What are the priorities? Working with PSTA. And, we have this joint agreement. I mean, again, why are we siloed? Why aren't we having this conversation about a big strategic plan for the next 6 to 8 years with Galvano, with Wilton Simpson, with Sprawls, it's all right here. And if we don't take advantage of it, it's not going to come back around. It's going to cycle around the state, as we all know, that those of us that have worked in the legislative process in Tallahassee. So I think that we need to take it up about 5 notches in terms of being a lot more aggressive. I would appreciate having some talking points with what we know today that is low-hanging fruit that we're going to ask for next year legislatively. I think the whole board should have walk-around talking points I can carry around in my purse, and I sit down with somebody, and I'm like, okay, here's what you're going to hear about in the next 6 months.
Let me say this, okay? Mr. Seward, you said you have those legislative priorities in September. Is that what you just said?
We will, yes.
I'm going to put you under the gun and say have them first part of August.
Okay.
And I think that it needs to go before the legislative committee first, let them see it. And then after they've vetted it, they can either change, delete, add, then bring it to the board. I don't want you to bring it to the board in August. I'm asking that that you have it ready when the legislative committee meets in August, whatever it is, then have it before this board after their meeting as part of their presentation to this board.
And actually, that's the time frame. When I said September, it was after the August committee meeting workshop.
All right, okay. All right.
And Commissioner Shanahan, you are absolutely correct. We do need to have a strategic communications plan, and that's the point of making our efforts known to the board that we are going to be developing a strategic communication strategy moving forward where you will have the talking points that you need. And you are correct about the need for us to be looking out, not just today and what we need today, but looking out into that long term. And that's why we need to develop the short range 5-year plan as well as the 10-year plan moving forward. The most immediate need right now is to do the 2019 legislative agenda and get that solidified. And then immediately following that, jump into doing that 5-year plan so that we can solidify what our needs are and what our priorities are going to be from a legislative and funding perspective over the course of the next 5 years. Because it's imperative that we not wait till the legislative sessions begin before we start our legislative efforts. When as soon as the 2019 legislative session ends, we need to be meeting with our elected officials and beginning to planning 2010 and beyond with them and help educating them when are our projects coming forward and when are we going to need their help and assistance in moving these projects through the pipeline to ensure that we're able to secure the funding where we need to obtain it from. So that's part of what my goal is to make sure that we are being extremely proactive in working with our legislative delegates and utilizing the opportunities that we have before us by having leaders from this region sitting in Tallahassee and really driving what's happening as far as the legislature is concerned and taking advantage of those opportunities. So yes, we will definitely be doing that, and I'd love to get any feedback that you may have as individual board members as we move forward.
Thank you, Ms. Presley.
I have one other point. The more that you meet with them when they're home in the summer, the more impactful it is. So with all due respect, going to Tallahassee is way late. And also, having these conversations, I mean, I'm expressing frustration because those of people that have sat with me on this board for 5 years have heard me say it since the first day I sat here, that we are just way off of any schedule of being regularly thought of as an agency that has a plan. I mean, if you understand the cycle of activity in Florida, it might be different than Georgia, is that you have an ascendancy. So you're interim speaker, you're next speaker, then you're raising money. Your power is, when you're speaker the first year, you're probably a step down from the power you had the year before. So you really have to understand how it works in Tallahassee, how you maximize it, and to say that we're going to wait till after the legislative session in June to have a conversation about taking advantage of the next 6 to 8 years, in my opinion, you've lost 3 years of ability to impact the system. So I don't want to get into a tit for tat. This is what happens when you should have a conversation at the legislative committee. We should have regular meetings, and we should have been having these conversations, frankly, in April or May of last year, the minute the legislative session ends. Okay. But we didn't, and you're just hearing my frustration for 5 years of not having a plan.
Final comment, Mr. McLean.
Yeah, and Ms. Shanahan, I share your concerns and frustrations. I've been on the board for 3 years, and I've been asking for talking points for 3 years. And so we're taking that, and that's what I would call the first step of this, is trying to pull that all together. Again, I'm asking that board members take part in this when we have those committees.
We're done with this, folks. We'll be dragging this to next week sometime.
Yes.
Okay. Cindy Zambella.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, directors. For the record, Cindy Zambella, Interim Director of Procurement. Before you today are the procurement considerations for the upcoming solicitation for the state legislative contract. So the last time this solicitation was released was back in 2014, and the contract was awarded to the advocacy group. The contract was a 2-year contract with 2 one-year options. It was a not-to-exceed contract of $160,000, and that contract was terminated on May 30th of this year. At this time, I'd like to bring Jerry Presley back up to discuss the deliverables and the performance measures that will be included in the solicitation and part of the resulting contract.
Thank you, Cindy. As we began to look at issuing the new RFP and working through the process, we took a evaluation of the previous scope of work and activities that were defined in the previous RFP. I had a conversation with executive leaders and got a lot of good feedback from them. It was definitely identified that there were concerns from the previous discussions I think that the board had on this 4 years ago about the need to have a much more robust scope of work, some well-defined deliverables, and some performance measures, and we took that into consideration. Under the scope of work, we identified a total of 16 items that we expect the contractors to be working on. We've identified some key actions in this presentation. The contractors are going to be expected to assist HART with the development and implementation of our annual short and long-range agendas. They will advocate on HART's adopted policies and funding priorities. They will actively monitor legislation on behalf of HART. They will develop and implement strategies for securing funding for our regional and state partners. They will actively coordinate HART's legislative activities with other entities, whether that's the MPO, T-Barter, Hillsborough County, or local municipalities. They will assist HART with the development of our coordinated communication strategy. Now, under the deliverables, again, we've identified a total of 14 deliverable items, and we've summarized them here for you. We expect the consultant will schedule and plan regular meetings with our state delegates, not only in Tallahassee, but also here in Tampa. We expect them to plan and host 2 biannual greet and meet sessions to showcase HART's projects and programs. We want the contractor to hold 2 annual or biannual face-to-face meetings with our governor's office and the cabinet members. We expect them to hold regular meetings with key executive branch agency leaders and provide weekly, monthly, and quarterly reports to HART regarding their activities. And finally, meet biannually with the board of directors for comprehensive strategy sessions. Under the performance measures, we identified 8 very specific performance measures. The performance measures are utilized to help evaluate whether or not a contractor is performing to the standards and expectations of the agency. And we've laid out a very robust plan for that process. They will be evaluated based upon the timeliness, quality, and quantity of the required reports and legislative updates and presentations that they will be expected to provide to us or on our behalf. They will be evaluated based upon the meetings and schedules that they attend on our behalf. They will be evaluated based upon the biannual meet and greets, the legislative wrap-ups, and related events. They will be evaluated based upon their participation in the comprehensive strategy sessions, the reviews of annual and short-term and long-term agenda planning, as well as their briefs, white papers, testimonies, articles of publications, letters, or legislation that they produce on our behalf. And they will also be evaluated based upon the level of assistance that they provide in securing funding on behalf of HART for our projects and programs. Cindy?
Thank you, Jerry. So with regard to the process, the policy states that the authority may use either a competitive or an informal solicitation process in obtaining the legislative consulting services, and that you shall also appoint an ad hoc committee to oversee the process. So both processes require that we establish evaluation criteria, that the establishment of a committee is done to evaluate those proposals, and that the ranking and recommendation of no fewer than 3 firms is done unless 3 firms do not respond or are found to be responsive. Essentially, the differences in the two solicitation processes are that with the competitive process, we will publicly announce the RFP and accept proposals from all interested firms. With the internal process or informal process, we would identify 3 highly qualified firms and obtain and rank those proposals individually just from those 3 firms. So today, staff is recommending that we employ the competitive solicitation process for the purposes of transparency and as a best practice. That the board member that is selected today for the oversight process be the chairman of the Legislative and Strategic Planning Committee. That we use both technical merit and price as our evaluation criteria. That we bring all qualified, highly ranked firms back to the board for full presentations. And that we employ a 2-year base contract with 2 one-year options. So, Mr. Chair, these are the decisions that we need to make today.
Okay. Any questions? Is there a second? Gotta get a second on the motion first.
Well, second for discussion.
Okay, all right. We got a motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Councilman Suarez. Now, Commissioner White.
Well, there's a decision to be made in bullet point number 1, so we can't just simply move approval of the document that was on the screen.
Right. So these.
But we need to make that decision today.
The
Correct?
recommendation was made to be competitive, is what I moved.
These are the decisions that need to be made. These are the staff recommendations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion of the motion?
I just have one quick question, Chair, about the you got here a 2-year base contract. Didn't we used to have a 3-year base contract previously?
The last contract was a 2-year base with 2 one-year options.
It was a 2-year base. Okay, that's all. I just want to make sure.
Any further discussion of the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted. Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay. All right, federal legislative update, Holiday Night staff, Mr. Carl Koch and Ms. Lisa Barkovic, and from Booth Transit Consulting, Jeff Booth. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Rich Gold from Honda Night. I run our public policy group in Washington, and I'll just be leading off before Lisa goes into HART-specific items, just to give you an update on sort of the current state of play in Washington. Obviously, we're coming up to our normal August recess for the House and the Senate. We're going to be bypassing a good chunk of that in the Senate this year, with the Senate staying in session to consider appropriations measures, judicial nominations, possibly the Supreme Court nomination, obviously, as well as executive branch nominations. So the Senate will be taking off that first week in August and then back for at least a couple weeks and maybe off the week before Labor Day. The House is here through the first week in August and then will be off for the traditional summer recess through Labor Day. So the idea here is to try and get as much of the FY19 appropriations process done as possible before the election. And committees in the House and Senate are moving through the appropriations process so far, although, as is typically the case, bills are a bit stalled in terms of getting to the House and the Senate floor. So leadership will be trying to work through those issues, and in particular with regard to what we care about, we are sort of in process with the transportation appropriations measure. It is equivalently funded to last year. Jeff and Lisa will talk more about that. So we do have relatively robust grant funding coming through the pipeline that we can talk a little bit more about in terms of bus and bus facilities and the build program and the other things that you all will be focusing on in prioritizing and will be focusing on lobbying for you. When we get back in September after Labor Day, we only have about 8 or 9 days here before they will leave to campaign in October before the elections. And then we will come back in November, finish up whatever appropriations measures we haven't completed yet prior to Christmas, as well as do the leadership organization and those types of activities for the next Congress. So let me have Lisa take over and go over HART-specific items.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. So as Rich just mentioned, we're in the middle of the FY19 appropriations process. We got a late start to finalizing the FY18 bill, so I'm just going to back up until this past spring when the President signed the FY18 Omnibus Appropriations Bill into law. And that's important because until that was done, the grant solicitations that we see out now weren't able to be put out onto the street until this very important step by the President had been completed in March. And typically, that should be done by end of September. You know, the federal fiscal year starts October 1. So Congress and the administration, the federal government was, several months behind in getting that process done. So right now, as Jerry had mentioned in his 100-day action plan, there are a couple of federal grants right now that HART is working on. One was just submitted for low-no, that's the low-no emissions, and that was for 5 new buses. Pending right now, the solicitations are currently open, is the FY18 Bus and Bus Facilities Grant. Again, HART will be submitting for the heavy maintenance facility. HART had submitted that for FY17 funding. We got some feedback from that application, and so all of that will be used from the information in our meetings with DOT and FTA will be used to finalize that. And then we have the FTA TOD planning grant that's open. What we're doing on behalf of HART in Washington is meeting with the congressional staff members, briefing them on those applications, and getting letters of support from the congressional delegation so that the Department of Transportation can see the robust support that HART has from its congressional delegation. And then looking forward to FY 2019, as Rich also mentioned, the funding has been increased on the House side for Department of Transportation funding. It's up by almost $1 billion. That bill will not make it to the House floor in the traditional sense. They have to let the Senate move it on the Senate floor first. But right now we're looking at some increases for both the BUILD, which is formerly the Tiger Grant program. That has seen a significant push. It's usually funded at $500 million. And you can see the House has it at proposed at $750, and the Senate has it at $1 billion. And that is a good program to look at for future projects and endeavors. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to talk about the capital investment grant funding proposals and what FTA has been in talks and discussions on that.
Thanks, Lisa. As you begin to look at bus rapid transit investments and streetcar investments in the region, you'll be focused on the capital investment grants program. The good news is both for 18 and also for 19, Congress increased the funding beyond the authorization level. And so at this point, there's money that would exceed about $2.6 billion will ultimately be the number for the 19 bill. And there's money in that bill that has not yet been committed to projects, and currently Congress is in conversation with the administration to try to execute grant agreements, as there are several projects that are in the queue that are being held right now at the Secretary's office, waiting sort of resolution of the process and revision of the process as announced. This June 29th, they sent out a Dear Colleague letter indicating their indication or their interest in revising the grant evaluation process, and so they'll be issuing guidance sometime in the next couple of weeks out for comment for 60 days and finalizing by September. So we're waiting to see what those changes will bring. And so that's part of why these projects have been held until they resolve that process and re-rate the projects under the revised process. So we're waiting for that. I just sort of note also that what we'll be looking at, if you're looking at a 180-day plan for the next session, would be one, Congress will have to revisit the budget agreement, and Rich can talk about that a little bit, and we'll begin discussions about the next surface transportation authorization bill, because that'll have to get passed in the next 2-year Congress. So we'll need to be focusing on that and what the priorities are for HART heading to that authorization bill, because it does expire September 30th of 2020.
As Jeff mentioned, that process, we're going to have a new chairman of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Currently, the current chairman has announced that he's not running for re-election, and so that there are already 2 House members that have announced their intents to be the next chairman. But obviously, you know, with the midterm elections, we're all kind of waiting to see what the final ratio will be for Republicans and Democrats, because if there is a change in party leadership, if the Democrats were to take over the majority of the House, there will be then changes between the chairmans, the ranking members, as well as committee ratios, meaning right now Republicans have more seats on any one given committee and the Democrats have lesser, and that can always tend to shift the balance. So that is something that we are working on too, is trying to look towards the future. Who are the big changes that are happening to the different chairmen of the committee, and what we could possibly see happen in the November midterm elections without having too much access to a crystal ball.
Chair, if I can ask a question. I know that in terms of the House leadership, in terms of the House committee chairs, are they in transition now? Because I know that they made the rule to limit the amount of time that they're chair for some of these committees. Are we in flux, regardless of what the outcome is going to be in terms of the parties? Will that be changing?
Yeah, well, that's in fact why Chairman Schuster is retiring at the end of the Congress, and so we'll have one of a few people, again, if Republicans hold the majority, who will be kind of lining up behind him in that space, and if Democrats were to retake the majority, again, we'll have to see who our Democratic Speaker nominee would be at that point, and then
I don't want you to go to the crystal ball in terms of whether there's a blue wave, a trickle, or just no one's opening the faucet. I just want to know if Schuster is gone. Then I mean, who's the heir apparent in that committee?
Sam Graves. Yeah, I mean Sam Graves, who's the chair of the Highways and Transit Subcommittee, has been angling hard to be considered the chair of the committee. If the Republicans hold the House.
And Graves is from where?
He's from Kansas.
Oh, Kansas, okay. Yeah, a lot of trains.
And then Peter DeFazio from Oregon is the current ranking minority member, and he would presumably, if the Democrats took the House, would be the chair, and presumably he will stay as ranking minority member if the Democrats don't take the House.
Transit in Kansas, right?
What's that?
A lot of transit in Kansas.
Well, I will say to his credit, he's been one of the few House members that's been willing to talk about sustainable funding for the surface transportation program, and has been on record as articulating the need to look at gas tax or vehicle miles traveled or some other alternative revenue source. So he's one of the few House members that's been willing to go public and vocal on the need to sort of address that. So to his credit, he's willing to take some leadership on those issues.
Terrific. Thank you. Appreciate it.
We'll have a rail system through the cornfields.
Well, I think it's important to note at the federal level, there has really been a strong sort of bipartisan effort on maintaining transit funding, which you're seeing in the bills, and strengthening the capital investment grant program with some pushback from the administration, and then House and Senate Republicans pushing back on the administration. So transit has been pretty strongly supported up there in a way that perhaps 10 or 15 years ago we wouldn't have seen that kind of strong bipartisan support.
I agree.
I'm sorry, Chair. Is there any Florida members on the committees that we have to go through? I didn't think they were, but I just want to make sure that nothing's changed.
So on appropriations, we have Senator Marco Rubio.
Sure, of course.
And then we also have Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart, who's the chairman of the Transportation and HUD Appropriations Subcommittee.
Okay.
And so Congressman Diaz-Balart has been very instrumental and a good friend to transit on these programs.
Terrific. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Anything else? Any other questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Interim Chief Executive Director report, Mr. Stewart.
I'll be very quick. Next month at the October 6th board meeting, we are going to provide an overview of. August 6th. I'm jumping ahead to the budget already. An overview of are addressing a lot of the comments that you've heard folks come to the podium to talk about over the last few months. We want to provide some very good updates on where we are, particularly with the enunciators, with our taxi voucher program, and so on. So we will be prepared to provide you an update on that. You also have an update on where we are with the budget that goes before the committee in August, and a couple of items that we will have high-level discussions on at the August 6th meeting. Depending on what happens with the petition drive at the end of this month, on August 6th, we will be talking about any work that we will need to do between now and November as far as an agency with the TDP update, with financial advising, and so on. So that is. We're not actively pursuing that work at the moment, but we are waiting, just like everyone else in the community, to see where this goes, and we will be prepared to talk to you about a plan of the next 4 months in preparation if it does go forward. And with that concludes my report.
Thank you. I have no report at this particular one time. General Counsel?
Nothing further. We're working on the policies. We hope to have them back to you guys in October. That's it.
Okay, moving to public comment. And while she's bringing that, members, remember that email is going to be coming forth today concerning the ad hoc committee on executive director search. If you're interested, please get that back to staff as soon as possible, because I want to make those appointments as soon as possible. Sandra Seidel. What? What did you say? I would call Lady Sandra Seidel.
Good morning. Thank you. During this past week, I felt that I've gotten a lot of disservice from HART. I'm going to preface this all that I've been using HART services for 36 years, not only the bus, but HART Plus. I also was part of a committee that helped with the ADA training for the bus drivers. Now I'm part of your ambassador program, and I'm also now the chair of the ADA committee. So I feel that the way I have been, what I consider discrimination, especially this last week, with not only the buses, the ramps not working, the poor attitudes of the drivers, seat belts not working, and then with the new cab company, United Cab. I'm being told, because I'm in a wheelchair, I cannot be guaranteed a ride in United Cab. Second of all, that even if they could get a cab to me, then they can't guarantee how many hours it would be before that would even be serviced. Second of all, they're telling me now that I have to make a reservation a day in advance. Our contract that I know of is for a 24/7 service. I'm going to be bringing all of this kind of thing up at our ADA meeting next month. But I also want to bring up to you the fact that this is what's happening, not only to me, but to other disabled residents here in Hillsborough County. Second of all, I want to bring up that a lot of the bus stops that are out there are not ADA accessible. 3 of the major ones that I have to use is at UATC, where now the bus 275LX and Route 48 stage, it's a mud hole. The ramps do not extend over to the sidewalk, so therefore I cannot get on and off that bus. Brandon Town Center Drive, that we have been negotiating with from our in-house attorney and Brandon Mall's attorney for 15 years. All we need is a slab there at that stop. Another problem area is at the new Super Walmart on East Brandon Boulevard. I'm being told that, and this is from 3 or 4 years ago, that the DOT was going to, do more to that road. But again, the sod is this thick. I cannot get off the bus nor back on. All we need is a slab there. I'm to the point where I'm going to buy HART some cement, have it delivered here, and somebody's going to have to go out and make these, stops ADA accessible. There's more wheelchair riders out there than just me. We all need to be able to be serviced, and these aren't being done. These are some of the major problems, and I don't know, like I said, I'm going to bring it up at the ADA meeting, but I don't know what you guys want to do about it. I've talked to staff till I'm blue in the face. I'm fed up to hear. Something needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the only name I had coming for the public. Is anyone else? Mr. Stewart. How can we address those issues? We know how can we? We need to.
15 years.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
15 years. 15.
Well, don't blame them, Mr. Stewart, because they've only been here 9 months. But
so, I know we've had conversations with the staff. Some of these, I'll be frank, the first time that I've heard of a couple of these issues. We have currently, we have awarded a contract to TransPro that's doing a paratransit audit and a process analyses of our current service to find ways to improve it. Our BTI program, we absolutely have a lot of stops that are not ADA compliant. Part of our bus transit infrastructure program is grossly underfunded, and the backlog to make our sites ADA compliant is a slow process due to the lack of funding. However, I'm not making excuses because of the lack of funding. There are a lot of things that we have been spending on money in the last few years that can be reappropriated to this endeavor, and that's what we are looking at in the next CIP program to be able to address. So I will attend that ADA meeting. I will have a conversation with our speaker. Part of the update that we were providing in August is pertaining to our paratransit issues. And I will agree that there are way too many issues that come before the board not to notice that we have an issue with paratransit, whether perceived or real, and I believe it's a combination halfway down the road, that there are problems and we need to take it seriously and we need to address it. So you have my commitment that we will, we're moving forward with that audit and we'll bring those recommendations back to the board. 2, we will engage with the ADA committee on a plan for the next 6 months of being able to address these stop issues, even if it's reprioritizing some of the work that we have now to get these stops up to par. And we will reiterate again to both our supervisors, our directors, our managers, and our collective bargaining unit that we will not tolerate our operators who don't provide our riders, physically impaired or not, with the due respect that they deserve. They will not be tolerated. And we have a process in place, a contractual process in place that we have to follow for disciplinary processes. We're in the process now of negotiating the next contracts. I will tell you that if it doesn't look as if these actions will affect behavior, we will look at changing some of that contract language to make sure that it shows our employees that we're very serious about their conduct on the road. So that's where we're going to go.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Any old business to come before us today? Commissioner Merman.
Feedback. I just want to ask you, are you going to bring a report back to the board about the empty bus situation?
About the what?
The empty bus. Remember I said we have a lot of
we'll bring back
empty buses running around.
Right, and there will always be empty buses every day.
Well, I know that, but at 7 and 8 and 9 o'clock at night, having big buses riding around empty when you know they're going to be empty, it's just, to me, not acceptable.
We will have a report brought back.
Thank you.
Any other old business? Ms. Shanahan.
I just have to say, put my frustration on the legislative is at a level 0 now. This ADA situation with the blind and the handicapped and this lack of service, the lack of ability to get control of these issues. I mean, I don't know what, I think it's embarrassing that it's taken, and it's not, there's fault in the organization in terms of how do we resolve this. As board members, we are constitutionally supposed to be managing risk. If I was a member of the ADA, I would file suit on this agency if it took them 15 years to put a concrete slab so I could get access to a bus to live my life. So I'm telling you, this has to be, every meeting we have these complaints, and every meeting we hear from the impacted public. And then we do get, yes, it's being resolved. Yes, the enunciators are going to be, or we don't have the money. We don't have this, we don't have that. But somehow, some way in our process, we have to make this a mandatory priority, because it is the one constituency that is a key constituency for public transit. And I leave here sick to my stomach when I hear these stories about the treatment. So whatever it needs to be, this needs to be, talk about a special committee or a directed, somebody needs to be in charge of this fixing this ADA population engagement. And I don't know, we all run lots of operations in our day-to-day life, and I'm not saying that this is Jeff's fault, because it's not Jeff's fault, but somewhere in the organization this is not the highest priority. And from my perspective, after, again, 4 years of hearing this, every single meeting there's a complaint about how the blind are treated or the accessibility issues. We somehow need to get this fixed.
Commissioner Kemp is recognized.
Just wondering about our budget, and this is just for future consideration, that we have to have a reflection. I'm also appalled, actually, at a lot of our stops. But a budget that we can start to set aside every year for dealing with simple things, like a budget set aside where we just start dealing with these priorities, like slabs of concrete that are cheap, but also I've been our bus stations, and I've said this before, and this is not because I've said it a year ago. When I see so many of our bus stations, and I know because we have so many other needs and because we're so grossly underfunded, but I think we do have to be looking at also our stations on some regular basis, our stops, to figure out how we can improve those as well.
Mr. Hart, you recognize.
I just had a quick question, just understanding the process. So, is all work for maintenance of bus shelters and bus stops subcontracted out, or is there staff that is able to do these minor jobs?
We have a combination. We have direct media who provides advertising in many of our shelters, and they're responsible for the upkeep from the power washing to the cleaning to the emptying of trash and so on. And we are actually modifying that contract now to hold them more accountable. Our other stops are maintained by our own maintenance crews.
So I live in the city, and I can call transportation, and they'll tell me these 2 blocks of the street in your neighborhood are on a list, and it's 17th on the list to get repaved. So there's other things with more potholes so there's a list. Do we have a list like that, and do we have employees who are able to pour these 3 pieces of concrete?
In the last few months, we actually completed a complete inventory of all of our stops. We already have an inventory of our stops of what needs ADA upgrades, but we created a database of all of our stops with photographs, and we're prioritizing just the rehab of those as well as the maintenance of those. So we're in the process of doing that. In the past, we would just wait for a complaint and we would try to go out and fix it.
Great. So then in addressing Ms. Shanahan's concerns and Ms. Kemp's request, I guess, so we'll get a list. I mean, then can we have a internal maintenance CIP list that we can?
We can do that.
Okay.
Yes, we have the opportunity to do that.
And can we make sure that this lady's 3 issues are on the list?
I'm sorry?
That the issues that she identified are on the list?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Let me ask a question. I understand what Ms. Shanahan is saying. I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. And Ms. Kemp and Mr. Hart is asking for a list of those stops that are not ADA compliant or they're having issues with it. We get that list that has come with a price tag, then what? Then what? We already know that our budget is lower than a pimple on the belly of a pregnant earthworm.
We just got $4 million from the increased appraisals that they're collecting out of the millage.
That's earmarked to do what?
Well, we also have a $5 million deficit that includes that extra $4 million, including the county funding of $2.3.
I just want to put that out there. I just want to put it out there because if we're asking for a list, and I agree with you, we need to know what those stops are and what's going on with them. And there are some dismal stops, regardless of ADA being ADA compliant. They're not even human compliant because the mere fact is where they are and where they're standing and where they're sitting. But we get those. My question remains, what do we do? Okay? No, don't go into that. I just asked the question. That's all. So all I did was ask the question. Okay? Pardon me?
You should ask that at your county commission meeting.
Well, I think the buck starts here, not the county commission. It starts here. Then it goes to the county commission. I think that's been put out there by Mr. Smith a number of times how this process works. Any new business?
I just want to say it would be a good legislative ask.
Could be. Any new business?
I have one, and sorry, I've talked a lot today, overtalked my thing. I was at a conference in in New York City on Saturday night where ABB, which is a Swiss company, $20 billion company, but on the panel that they had, Proterra, the electric bus guys out of San Francisco were there. I went up and introduced myself. He said, I'd love to come give a presentation in terms of what's happening in the electric bus industry. They're doing work in Miami. They're doing work in Denver, 5 other states, but he was a young generational leader, so I'm going to give that contact to Jeff, and he said he'd be more than happy to come.
I just want to say that Proterra, when they came here, I met with them. I went to the bus conference and asked them and told them we were very interested. They came, and Jeff did this, and I deeply appreciate it. Spoke with them, arranged to have them come to Tampa. We had a full day, and they put it out. It happened very quickly because there was a grant deadline coming up, and we made that grant deadline to apply for 5 buses from Proterra. And so I just want to thank you, Jeff, for so aggressively moving on that. I think we needed to have done that for a long time, and it happened so quickly that I think we don't even almost realize that it happened.
Another Proterra contact would be great because we're going to hopefully get those buses and start prototyping.
So we're in new business. Ms. Donahue, did I see your hand?
I just want to make sure that, for the record, we are searching for a permanent CEO.
Yes.
Not a new CEO.
Well,
permanent is the word I'm looking for.
I'm gonna leave that alone. Any other new business? Seeing none, we're adjourned.
project started today.